Okay, I was told that after this next volume, is when I do the side stories. Okay, that's fine by me. I shouldn't have to worry about any interruptions, hopefully, because the kids are at school, or heading to school, and my mom is upstairs, so I should be fine. Prologue. Gil watched the snow slammed against the window. There was another blizzard outside. The Lord of Winter was no doubt going on a massive rampage somewhere. Why couldn't the Knight's Order just kill it already? Once it was gone, he could gather the peruse Lady Rosemary left to eat. Yeah, because she hasn't been able to eat those yet since this winter. She hasn't been able to eat them for 2 years. So, yeah, she's a bit declining on that one. Kai, bring that box over here. Salim, take that paper from the shelf, Gil instructed. Each breath came out as a fine mist so icy white that he thought it might freeze mid-air. He paced on the spot, genuinely worried about his toes freezing from the cold, braving on his fingertips every now and then in an attempt to warm them. Since the Rosemine workshop was located in what had once been a storage space, and since it was packed with flammable goods like paper, there was no furnace for them to use. Is this all we need to carry? Asked Occam, the Grey Priest. Gil gazed across the workshop once more and nodded. The Grey Priest had picked up all the paper and tools they would need for their handiwork. He stepped outside with the others, firmly locked the door, and then hurried away from the workshop. Now began their work in the orphanage's dining hall. Ah, Gil, thank you for enduring the cold, Fritz said upon noticing his return, taking a momentary pause from leading the others. Which section will you manage? Is it about time for us to switch? Gil mulled over the question. He had been operating as a supervisor up until yesterday, so maybe switching with Fritz was indeed a good idea. They regularly exchanged the position to ensure their reports to Rosemine were as accurate as possible. 2 sets of eyes made it easier for them to evaluate how the Grey Priests were handling their work and pick up on any interpersonal issues among them. I will oversee the bookmaking today, Fritz. Please handle the carta and reversi. Once they had settled on their roles, Fritz went to a corner where some of the Grey Priests were working. Gil, meanwhile, moved over to the Grey Shrine Maidens who were busy making books. The books needed to be ready for the end of winter when they were due to be sold at the castle. The importance of sales day was increasing by the year, with more and more books being needed. Winter handiwork was a very busy time for everyone. Now, Dirk, look carefully. You need to make sure the pages are exactly on top of each other, Delia explained. She had previously served as an attendant to Lady Rosemite, and now she was teaching her eager young brother how to help as well. The year prior, Dirk had been constrained to either a corner of the dining hall or a children's room on the first floor so that he wouldn't get in the way. But now he was grown enough to follow instructions from the adults. I might want to include this in my report to Lady Rosemine. Yeah, that'd probably be a good idea. Lady Rosemine was especially interested in updates on Delia and Dirk. She couldn't meet with her own little brother Camille's family due to a magic contract, so she experienced his growth through Dirk. Oh, Gil, supervising us today? Delia asked. Come see how much Dirk has improved. You can tell Lady Rosemine he's been doing really good today. She was enthusiastically gesturing Gil over as she spoke, obsessively praising her little brother in the same way that some parents might gush over their children. As far as I know, I think Delia is, 12? 11, 12 at this point? Dang, a few more years and she's going to be hitting her dang coming-of-age ceremony. Who would have guessed? Gil sat down nearby and observed Dirk's heroic battle with the paper. There was a deadly seriousness in his dark brown, almost black eyes as he delicately positioned sheet atop sheet as directed by Delia. Seems like Dirk's just about ready to join the workshop, Gil observed. Might also be able to bring him to the forest once all the snow melts. Perhaps because he was conversing with an old friend, Gil reverted to his old crude way of speaking. He was no longer talking as formally as one would expect from an attendant serving the High Bishop, but Delia didn't chastise him for it. Really? He's been talking about how much he can't wait to go to the workshop. Isn't this exciting, Dirk? At this exchange, Dirk began focusing even more intensely on stacking sheets. Delia smiled at her younger brother's efforts before returning to weaving her own stack of paper together with thread, while Gil similarly began his bookmaking work. So, Gil, how is Lady Rosemine doing? Delia abruptly asked midway through her work, her eyes focused on her hands as though it was just a casual question. Gil shot her a side glance and then shrugged. You saw her when she looked over the place, didn't you? Delia pursed her lips slightly, having not received the answer she wanted. Monica said she's so frail now that she can only move with a bunch of magic tools. But she was moving fine when she came here, wasn't she? I'm worried she hasn't actually gotten better. She always pushes herself too hard and too far in the weirdest ways, so, I mean, yeah, she's not wrong. But yeah, she was moving fine because of the magic tools. Delia knew Lady Rosemine in a way that Monica and Nicola didn't, having served her back when she was still an apprentice Blue Shrine Maiden, back when she was still mine. She had the sharp instincts one could only develop from spending so much time around Rosemine's old, honest self. Gil had a stronger bond with Delia than the others, since they were both worried about Rosemine in ways the others didn't. They say she can't even move without the magic tools yet, but they're still going to make her do the dedication ritual. She had to deal with nobles in the castle right after waking up, and now, even though she's finally back from the Royal Academy, she's stuck helping the High Priest and making sure he eats. That's messed up, right? I mean, for crying out loud, she spent 2 whole years in a coma, Gil grumbled. And Fran is letting this happen? Delia asked, looking at Gil with searching eyes. He and Zom are sure she'll be completely fine with the High Priest there. Makes me want to ask whose attendants they really are sometimes. Gil was pretty unhappy about how many attendants in the High Bishop's chamber showed favoritism toward the High Priest. Not only did it make him uncomfortable, but he deeply felt it was wrong. Still, Ferdinand had control over Rosemine's schedule, and it was too much of a risk to say anything negative about him in the High Bishop's chambers. In the end, Gil decided to keep his thoughts to himself. He didn't want Franz and Zahn to become hostile toward him, but he still really wished they would think about Rosemine first and foremost. The words had kind of slipped from his mouth on this occasion, since he assumed Delia would agree with him. Well, Fran used to serve the High Priest, and was always prioritizing his opinions over everything else. The thing is, though, Delia looked straight at Gil. Her blue eyes were like quiet forest springs, calm and undisturbed. If you start ignoring other people's warnings and advice, even out of compassion for Lady Rosemine, you might end up like me. I never intended to put Dirk in danger, you know. Back then, Delia had been so stubbornly focused on Dirk that she had ignored warnings from Fran and the others, and instead had asked the late High Bishop for help. That very move had put her dear old younger brother in danger, the one thing she had so desperately been trying to avoid. Delia didn't want Gil to end up blinded in the same way when it came to Rosemine. Her warning made him recoil slightly, as though he had been struck in the face. We don't know the first thing about noble society, Delia continued. Despite how sick she is, Lady Rosemine is going along with the High Priest's suggestions, right? Maybe there's something we don't know about? Which means she has no other choice. Your work with the Gutenbergs means you're away from the temple more than most of her attendants, so maybe you should talk to Fran and Zom a bit more to get up to speed. Delia chuckled to herself at that last remark. She had matured so much that it really was like a smack in the face. Gil had already considered himself an adult since he had grown bigger and could do his job, and now he was starting to wonder whether he had still been a kid on the inside all along. Maybe. Having a childish side to you does not necessarily mean that's a bad thing. I guess she's with Fran and Monica today, Gil said. Lady Rosemine's temple attendants would eat the leftovers of each meal, but since Lady Rosemine always needed someone with her, they couldn't all eat at once. There was a door in the High Bishop's chambers that led to storage space, a staircase for attendants, and the head attendants' room. The last was where the attendants would take turns to eat, and it was made in such a way that they would all know as soon as their lady rang the bell for summoning others. Gil, what were you talking to Delia about earlier? Fritz asked during the meal. Gil paused for a moment, his gaze inadvertently turning to Zom. Could he risk speaking critically of the High Priest with him nearby? Zom soon noticed the eyes on him and set down his spoon with a guarded look. Is Delia planning something dangerous? Fritz probed. No, don't worry, nothing like that. There are many who thought Delia hadn't been punished enough for exposing both the High Priest and Rosemine to danger. Gil had agreed with them at the time, but he no longer saw her as even a slight threat, nor did he consider her being stuck in the orphanage forevermore a light punishment. Delia is nothing but grateful to Lady Rosemine. She will not repeat her former mistakes, Gil said flatly. He then remembered the advice Delia had given him about talking to others more and returned his attention to Zom. She was just worried about Lady Rosemine being so busy despite having so recently woken from her 2-year slumber. She thinks it's wrong to force her weakened body to move through the use of magic tools, and I feel the same way. Is it really necessary to put Lady Rosemine through this? Even after receiving Delia's advice, Gil was still dissatisfied with how Ferdinand was handling things. It seemed that Zom had picked up on this as he furrowed his brow in displeasure. Do you not believe the High Priest? Zom asked. As long as he is here, I know the High Priest saved Lady Rosemine's life. I know he is something else, Gil said, shaking his head as he interrupted Zom. Then you should also know it's safe to leave everything to him. Gil couldn't bear to hear those same words he had already heard so many times before. He was grateful to Ferdinand, and it was clear to see he was more understanding than most nobles, but still. It was hard to believe putting such a burden on Lady Rosamund when she could barely even move was really wise. Why did the High Priest make Lady Rosamund go to the castle and the Royal Academy before she could properly recover? Why is he making her do so much work while she's still sick? You can smile and say she's better now all you want, but I remember her lying limp on the bench and why she stiffened with fear when she woke up and first looked around. Gil complained, letting out all the emotions had built up inside him. His gratitude toward the High Priest for saving Rosamund was completely separate from his dissatisfaction about how she was being treated. Fritz frowned, his expression tinged with worry. Gil, I understand how you feel, but please calm down. Gil bit his lip. Being told to calm down made him feel as though his opinion was simply being rejected. Just as he was beginning to feel he had no one on his side, however, Nicholas spoke up. I really understand how you feel, Gil. Lady Rosamund still can't walk on her own. The only thing keeping her upright are the High Priest's magic tools. She can't even take them off when bathing. Nicola likewise knew how frightened Lady Rosamund had been upon waking up, and she knew from bathing her just how much she was unable to move. I understand that the High Priest's work and her duties as a noble are important, but I would appreciate it if she could focus on her recovery right now. I don't want to see Lady Rosamund so sad again. Gil was immeasurably relieved to have Nicola agree with him. It proved to him that there were others among Lady Rosamund's attendants who cared more about her than they did the High Priest. Zahn paused as he considered their opinion, then they looked up in realization, his gaze focusing on both Gil and Nicola. Fran, the High Priest and I all want Lady Rosamund to recover as soon as possible. We truly do. However, one cannot show weakness in noble society. I believe we have different understandings of this. What do you mean? Gil asked. You and Nicola have served only Lady Rosamund, correct? Never have you visited a noble estate. You are truly unfamiliar with the nobility, and you have never witnessed noble society. The High Priest is doing everything he can to ensure Lady Rosamund's burden as noble society is as slight as possible. Zahn was right that neither Gil nor Nicola had gone to a noble estate before. The only nobles they had met in person were those who came to the temple. They could also hardly disagree that they were oblivious when it came to noble society. All of a sudden, they felt as though they were in the wrong. That only frustrated Gil, who desperately tried to think of some way to argue back. But the High Priest has been spending days in his workshop prioritizing his research above everything else, Gil eventually countered. He won't leave her even eat unless Lady Rosamund comes calling for him, which is bothering everyone, right? Isn't that an important part of reducing her burden in noble society? He said himself that only he could save her, so I would rather he actually prioritize her recovery. I mean, considering the fact that, once she goes back to the Royal Academy, he's going to be stuck doing all the paperwork again, and he won't be able to do his research. I mean, I can understand him wanting to do his research now while she is able to help lessen the burden, but that's still a lot on her. She's still a child. She might be an adult on the inside, but she's still a child. Or no, she might have the memories of an adult, but that doesn't mean she's necessarily an adult on the inside. Because as far as we know, her memories of being a Rano only came up when she was 5. She could have been either reborn completely into that world, or it could have been like, some of the other isekai where the main character will end up in the body of another character when they reincarnate, when they're already going on in life. They're not, like, born into this world. They're taking over somebody else's body. So, we don't know that for sure. But, yeah, he's been treating her like an adult, even though she's technically a child. So, he definitely should be prioritizing getting her back up to speed, getting her back to normal, so she can help him properly with his paperwork without those stupid magic tools. Zahn balked, having not expected such an argument. Gil took this opportunity to further press the matter, taking full advantage of the weak point he had revealed. I know the High Priest is incredible, but you're supposed to be Lady Rosamund's attendant, Zahn. I just want you to care about her more, too. Gil was certain of victory. As he prepared to hammer his point home, however, Fritz raised a hand to stop him. Zahn is not truly Lady Rosamund's attendant. It was only natural that he would consider the High Priest first and foremost. You must not hope for him to prioritize Lady Rosamund as you do, he said, his tone consoling. Gil and Zahn stared at Fritz, equally as surprised as each other. Nobody could believe what he had just said, and with such a calm smile, too. Fritz, what do you mean by that? Zahn asked. Are you insulting me? I am simply stating the truth. I mean no disrespect, nor do I think poorly of you. I believe Nicola and Gil will understand as well, though, an explanation is required. With that, Fritz began to speak of the past. Zom and I previously served a blue priest, but then... Oh, here we go. We're getting this explanation. Okay. So they're going to get the explanation, but I'm assuming mine is not going to find this out. And sorry, I keep on referring to her as mine instead of Rosemine, but it's just a habit, I guess. Zom and I previously served a blue priest by the name of Shnikikoza. He was a highly emotional and violent man, which made serving him quite troublesome. Still, life as an attendant was much better than the alternative. That was especially clear once Brother Shnikikoza returned to noble society, and we returned to the orphanage. You recall the terrible state of the orphanage back then, no? Gil nodded. He had been stuck in the orphanage himself at the time, so he had never met the blue priest Fritz was referring to. But he remembered just how terrible things had been when they were sent back. That was when more and more attendants were returning to the orphanage, making life instantly harder for everyone. He had wished that someone, anyone, would save him, so he was overjoyed when he was taken as Rosemine's attendant. You, Nicola, and I were saved by Lady Rosemine, while Zom was saved by the High Priest, Fritz went on. While Zom later came to serve Lady Rosemine, he did so at the request of the High Priest, who said she was lacking in attendance. It should come as no surprise, then, that Zom's loyalty remains with the High Priest. There is nothing wrong with that, of course, rather that it goes to show that his status and mindset differ from your own. Or from our own. Oh, I see, Nicola and Zom said in unison, both understanding Fritz's point. Gil understood as well. It was basically the same thing as him working for the planting company as a Gutenberg under Lady Rosemine's orders. With that in mind, he could internally rationalize Zom serving as Lady Rosemine's attendant while remaining loyal to Ferdinand. I still don't know about the High Priest hiding away in his workshop all day, Gil said with a frown. Nicola nodded in agreement, a wry smile touching her lips. Zom chuckled. Perhaps it will be easier if you flip the Gwenin board and consider things from the opposite perspective. Imagine the High Priest disappearing and Lady Rosemine spending 2 years swamped with work, no longer able to read her for pleasure. What would you do then if the High Priest suddenly returned and Lady Rosemine said she was to dedicate a few days to reading? Would you not consider this acceptable? I mean, Rosemine said it was acceptable, but obviously he needs to eat, so yeah. Hearing Zom's analogy made Gil empathize with why Ferdinand was spending so much time in his workshop, which in turn soothed the anger boiling within him. The High Priest was simply taking a short rest after suffering alone for 2 years to save Lady Rosemine. She had no doubt realized that, which was why she was forgiving this minor annoyance. Fritz gave a relieved smile, aware that Gil now understood. If you have any requests for the High Priest, ask Zom or Fran to voice them. It is highly likely he will consider them. For example, requesting that he continue his research only after giving Lady Rosemine an examination, or something of that sort. I will make that suggestion, Zom said with a grin and a nod. Okay, Lady Rosemine is very anxious about her magic contracts with the planting company being nullified, Gil said. Please ask the High Priest what he is thinking about that. Very well, I shall ask, Zom replied with a smile. Gil was grateful he was so willing to help. Rosemine behaved completely differently when she was talking to Lutz in her hidden room compared to when she was anywhere else. Only those who saw her were likely to understand she was living as a noble to protect her family and the Gutenbergs. Gil didn't think she needed to keep pushing herself. He wanted her to have somewhere she could smile freely, much like what she did when speaking to Lutz. Somewhere where she can actually, show her emotions, smile, cry, be angry. She needs that space, and that's where the hidden room is. Unlike Fran, he wasn't able to accept that this was just the way things were now that she was of a higher status. He wanted to make her beam with joy as she had used to when she headed for her home in the lower city. I want all that, but I can't exactly do anything in myself. Yeah, you can't do anything about that now. There's no way you can make that go back to normal. This is their new normal now. Gil cursed himself on the inside, knowing he had in fact hurt Rosemine by refusing her when she had attempted to pat his head. He had thrown himself into his printing work, eager to make as many new books as possible in case he had made Rosemine wake up sooner. He had wanted to grow up as quickly as possible, to be treated like an adult, so he had gotten used to stopping Zom and Fran whenever they tried treating him like a kid. But due to that, he had reflexively done the same with Rosemine. He had hurriedly composed himself straight after and knelt as normal, but Rosemine had still seemed a little sad when she praised him. The truth was that he had been so proud of all the hard work he had put in over the past 2 years, and the amount he had grown, that getting a pat on the head had almost broken his heart. Aww. As he came to realize that was the last time he would ever feel that her kind warmth, however, Dude! An unbearable loneliness swept over him. If only he hadn't foolishly rejected her, then she would have kept patting his head and continued praising him. I mean, you could still ask her to do that. All you gotta do is just have her go in the hidden room and ask her to do that in private. Actually, now that she's 10, she probably won't be able to do that with you anymore. She'd have to do that out in the open. And even then, I don't think she can. At the same time, however, the hand that had patted his head was so much smaller than the one in his memories. That thought alone was enough to bring tears to his eyes. Really? It was smaller? I don't think it was smaller. Maybe you were just imagining that her hand would get bigger. Because I don't think she shrunk. Did she? Did that giraffe shrink her? Things were no longer as they had once been. Back when Rosamund had served him, supporting him, and watched over him, it was now his turn to support his lady. His lady who was still small and young and afraid. Rosamund was anxious about her magic contracts being nullified, and Guild shared those concerns. He still vividly remembered leaving the temple for the first time and walking with Rosamund to her house in the lower city. That would never happen again. They would never go to that house again. He would feel even his most vivid memories of those old times fading more with each passing day. All he can do is hold on to the memories. That's all he can do. Gil continued to eat as he simmered in sentimentality. The next thing he knew, his plate was empty. He cleaned up his dishes and prepared to bring the leftovers to the orphanage. It was his and Fritz's job to bring them their divine gifts and then help with the handiwork. They pushed the heavy cart loaded with large pots down the hall. I imagine consulting the high priest will not save the contracts from being nullified, Fritz said to Gil. What will you do following the nullification? I believe it is more important for you to think of what you can do to best serve Lady Rosamund rather than what the high priest can do for her. Gil mulled over the question. What could he do? What would Rosamund want? I guess to stay close to Lutz, Lutz and the others. Even with the contracts being gone. For as long as I am in the temple, I want to help Lady Rosamund stay connected to the lower city, just as Lutz had done by delivering letters, he finally said. Fritz paused for a brief moment. That is a good idea. I am sure both Lady Rosamund and the planting company will be heartened to hear that. At the very least, Gil wanted to support Lady Rosamund such that the smile she gave when being brought a new book never changed, and so that she never turned entirely into a noble. He had found his goal, and his grip on the cart tightened as he looked over the future. I don't think you're ever going to have to worry about her not getting excited over a new book. Especially when you keep coming up with new ones. Ow, 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 ow. I don't know what the heck I did last night, but I did something to one of my fingers. And it hurts. Maybe I laid on it wrong. Maybe I jumped up in my sleep and landed on it. I don't know. I know I woke up and I was in a weird position. I don't know. But it hurt. If I try and, pop my knuckle, I can usually do that without it hurting at all, but now I can't even do that. Ow. Angelica came after the second bell while I was eating breakfast. It somehow feels so long since I last saw you, I remarked. I had training with Lord Bonifacius. My parents summoned me too, but they gave me permission to stay in the temple. Hold on, guys. Angelica hadn't yet graduated from the Royal Academy, so her guarding me in the temple was something of an unusual circumstance. The plan had initially been for her to follow me to the temple, even if she couldn't spend the night there, but traveling back and forth from the castle was dangerous with the increasing intensity of the blizzard, so she had asked her parents for permission to start staying overnight. I thought that would mean I could also participate in the Lord of Winter hunt, but when I asked Lord Bonifacius, he refused. What a shame. Angelica sighed wistfully, lowering her eyes. The tragic look on her beautiful fairy-like face made it hard to believe the reason for her sadness was not getting to take on a dangerous beast in a battle to the death. I think it's best that you do not go and take part in that anyway. At third bell, I moved to the high priest chamber. Such was part of my daily routine here in the temple. Ferdinand, that was third bell. It's time for work, I called to his workshop door. He stepped out a brief moment later, fixing me with a reluctant glare that had also become part of my daily routine. I glared right back at him. I only interrupt you once a day, You should think twice before looking at me like that, I said. It wasn't as though I was calling him out because I wanted to either. He had started ignoring the bells entirely while in his workshop, so it was up to me to remind him of the time. He had also blocked out Eckert entirely, no doubt fed up with his constant, insistent calling. If you do not wish for me to interrupt you, then I might suggest you allow Eckert's voice through again. You come only once per day, but Eckert's calls for me more times than I care to count. It reminds me of Lord Bonifacius from the recent past. Oh, God, yeah, when he would constantly bug you about when Rosemine was waking up. Oh, was Grandfather being a pain, I asked, trying to recall what points of contact they might have had. Ferdinand shook his head with a bitter grimace. It is over now. I do not even wish to remember it. Bonifacius had evidently done something to really annoy him. Now that Ferdinand was no longer in his workshop, it was time to start work. I took my usual seat and pulled out my stone slate. Do you always do work like this here, Lady Rosemine? Angelica asked, her eyes wide with disbelief as she looked between me and the stacks of paperwork. Ferdinand personally handles all the paperwork in the temple, I explained. As the High Bishop, I should technically be doing much of it myself. But I have had no choice but to entrust things to him. The most I can do is assist him with the math, since I still know far too little to approve the paperwork myself. No, I think doing this much math is amazing, Angelica exclaimed, a distinct sparkle in her blue eyes. She had become a knight specifically because she was so bad at her written classes, yet Ferdinand decided to give her work anyway. All those in the High Priest chamber shared the workload equally. Eckert handled this, Daniel handled these. Angelica worked with Daniel, and I shall guard the door of my life, Angelica interrupted, sucking in hair and clinging to the doorway. She had finally completed her written classes, so the very thought of needing to use her head again made tears well up in her eyes. Ferdinand flatly cut her loose without a moment's hesitation. Yes, Lord Bonifacius did mention that you were a problem child on the verge of failing. Attempting to give work to the incompetent is a waste of time. Let us begin. Daniel gave Angelica a look of concern, since she had just been called incompetent and useless, but she showed nothing but relief at not having to do any work. Fear not, Daniel, she does not need our concern. Angelica was the only one in the room not doing any paperwork, and so she planted her feet firmly in front of the door with a stern look on her face. It seemed she planned to do her job as a guard knight with aplomb. Well, I mean, if it's either do that or do paperwork. I think you know what she's gonna do. We continued working in silence until fourth bell, which signaled that it was time for lunch. Ferdinand, please eat before you hole up in your workshop again, I instructed while cleaning off my table. Ferdinand, however, simply gave me a steady look. No, I plan to spend this afternoon giving you a checkup. Wait, what? I have concluded from last night's dinner and your work today that your recovery is progressing slowly due to you relying so thoroughly on your magic tools. It was pointed out to me that I have not given you even a single checkup since you returned from the Royal Academy, and, judging by the color of your face, you do not seem to be in particularly good health. Oh, but I feel perfectly fine, I exclaimed, trying to mask the truth, but it was no tricking Ferdinand now that his mind wasn't on his research. Oh, yeah, you ain't getting out of this. A smile played on his lips as he looked at me. It was like he could read every inch of my mind. Oh no, he's going to get mad. He's going to figure out I haven't been exercising at all. Yeah, you have not been. I desperately glanced around for help, but both Daniel and Angelica averted their eyes, while Fran gave me a slightly frosty smile and asked me what exactly Ferdinand meant by me being in an unhealthy state. Oh, you're not getting any help. Eckert would always ally with Ferdinand no matter what, so I couldn't expect any help from him either. I was alone. Threat level, dragon. Fran, I will visit her chambers in the afternoon. Understood, we shall be waiting. Fran, don't make plans without me. I haven't even said anything. Yeah, you're not getting out of this. I protested on the inside, but of course nobody could hear it. Meanwhile, those serving Ferdinand were all cheerfully rejoicing over his research frenzy having calmed down a little. Now, Rosemine, return to your chambers and finish lunch, Ferdinand instructed, having decided my afternoon plans before I could find any allies. I believe you should focus on your research, Ferdinand. We must hurry to finish Schwartz and Weiss's clothes, after all. You are the one who said those can wait until next winter. No, I did not. I did say that. Why did I have to be so dumb? Too bad for you. You didn't know at the time that was going to happen, so that's why you said it. No, wait. Professor Herscher really needs her magic tools fixed and sent back soon. I have already fixed them. I'm assuming that what he was working on was Schwartz and Weiss, so... What was he working on then if he wasn't working on that? What? Really? Already? What about arranging the songs then, I asked, almost grasping at straws. Those must be completed before I return to the Royal Academy, do not forget. The song for the Goddess of Light in particular. I will arrange the song tomorrow afternoon while I direct your harpspiel practice. I imagine you think you have escaped practice by leaving your personal musician behind, but that is not the case. He saw right through me! Yes, he did! Why would I never think that? Rosemine, know when you are beaten. This is disgraceful. The plans have been made. Return to your chambers and eat. Remove your magic tools before I arrive. Fine. I exited the High Priest's chambers and trudged back to my own. As expected, I hadn't been able to trick him. Maybe it was too late, though. Maybe I could bust out. Maybe it wasn't too late, though. Maybe I could bust out some ways and train enough for my slacking to go unnoticed. Nope. Fran, why did you accept his visitation without my permission? I asked, venting my unjust anger on him with a glare. He met my frustrations with a calm smile. Now that you have met with the planting company, you have no plans until the dedication ritual. Would it not be best to finish this checkup as soon as possible? I, too, am worried about your health, Lady Rosemine. This will ease my own concerns as well. Fran had spoken to my other attendants about checking up on me since the last update on my health was before I departed for the Royal Academy, and they had all agreed it was best to entrust things to Ferdinand. It felt like they trusted him more than me, considering he had spent 2 years managing my health in the Jareve. My defeat was absolute. There was simply no room for me to refuse. The High Priest is surrendering some of his research time for your sake. That shows just how worried about you he is, Lady Rosemine. His words are harsh, but he is a kind man at heart, Fran said, respect and admiration clear in his eyes. No, no, no! There's no kindness here. Ferdinand gave a nasty grin the second he sensed my terror. You're being brainwashed, Fran. He's getting in your head. No, he's not. No, he's not. I think he does actually care. It's just the way he was raised around freaking Veronica and having to deal with the Royal Academy and the Noble Society and everything that got to him and made him like this. Because who knows I wonder how he was before all this. Was he actually, nice-ish? You gotta ask Sylvester that. Because, he would know. I gazed up dismissively, realizing that I should have ignored Eckert's plea for help and allowed Ferdinand's attendants to suffer until my muscles and stamina had recovered. Another blunder on my part. Please, Ferdinand, please return to your impenetrable fortress. After lunch, I used my borrowed ordonnance to ask Adelie to prepare for my meeting with Guy Haldensale. With that done, Monica and Nicola began removing my magic tools. My body got heavy in an instant, and I fell into the chair behind me with a thump. Lady Rosemine, are you okay? I'm quite all right. There's no need to worry. No need to worry? You immediately went limp and became unable to move. Hello, the magic tools were keeping her upright, of course. Nicola and Monica said, gripping the magic tools in their hands as they peered down at me with teary eyes. I tried waving a hand to indicate I was fine, but my arm didn't quite do as I wanted. It was only once I had focused on my mana, wrapped my body in it, and enhanced myself that I could move properly. It simply took me a moment to get used to not having magic tools on, I assured them. See? I'm just fine. It was shocking to see you collapse like that. Are you truly okay? She's not using her mana, she's not. I stood up and showed that I could now move normally. Nicola and Monica relaxed at the sight, overcome with relief, then changed my clothes as normal. All that remained now was to wait for Ferdinand. Rosemine, cancel your enhancement magic. I knew it. Yep. That's what I knew was going to happen. He's not going to let her do it with the magic. Ferdinand said with a sigh as he entered. I averted my eyes. He had seen through me the instant he walked in. Or would you rather endure an attack powerful enough to force you to cancel it? He quietly added with a cold expression. Nope. Nope, do it, girl. I speedily canceled my enhancements the second I saw his staff appear in his right hand. At the same moment, Angelica stepped between us with Stenlock at the ready. Ferdinand, it's cruel for you to rely on violence, I protested, poking my head out from behind Angelica. He scoffed dismissively. Do not blame me for your ignorance. My words were merely a euphemism requesting that you do not waste my time. Then why did you pull out your staff? I've never heard of a noble euphemism like that before. In fact, it doesn't even sound like one. I know, I kind of agree. Yeah, that's not I would rather... Even if it had been a euphemism, the fact that you pulled out your staff showed that you were serious. Or were you just trying to scare her, and that worked? I took a seat as I continued to complain, since it was much too painful trying to stand without magically enhancing myself. Angelica bobbed her head in agreement as she continued to wield Stenlock. Then you have not studied enough, Ferdinand said with an exasperated handshake. Angelica widened her eyes with a start. Oh, you're right. I didn't know there was a euphemism like that either, she said as she stepped away. My shield was gone. Wait, don't just abandon me like that! Ferdinand watched my attempt to cling to Angelica before turning away. Eckert, you may train with Angelica in the plaza by the Noble's Gate. Angelica, your body will grow dull if you remain inside all day. No? Wait, I can go outside? Angelica exclaimed. Daniel will suffice. Do not return until I summon you by ordinance. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, Angelica replied. She then excitedly left with Eckert. Why was she abandoning me when I explicitly wanted a female knight for checkups like this? Angelica, you big idiot, don't let yourself get manipulated so easily. She has the loyalty to wield a blade against me without hesitation, but she is shockingly brainless. Yep. I have to agree. Ferdinand observed. Rosamund, should you truly trust a half-wit like her to serve as your guard? I might have defended her this morning, but I feel incredibly uncertain all of a sudden. So yeah, even she kind of agrees with you on that one. Fran lifted me up at Ferdinand's instruction and set me down on a chair. I then moved my arms and legs as I was told to. It was surprisingly arduous and even painful without enhancements. Good grief, you didn't train at all in the Royal Academy, did you? A lot happened. I was busy every day. The reports indicated you spent every single day during the latter half of your time there holed up in the library. Yes, that's what I was busy with. The walk to and from the library was my exercise. While it is important to show no weakness in the Royal Academy, you need not fear attacks. Focus on your recovery while you are in the temple. Ferdinand said, ordering me to practice whirling with my magic tools and then remove them for rehabilitation on top of my Hearthspell practice. The dedication ritual involves using large quantities of mana, and your offering will be more efficient without your enhancement tools on. You will want to grow strong enough to move on your own before then. I should be fine enhancing myself without any tools. I've gotten quite used to it. I've actually gotten quite good at it. It may not be fine, you still lack experience. Once my checkup was over, my grueling days of rehabilitation began. Ferdinand had remarked in all seriousness that my continuing to use magic tools would make me dependent on them for the rest of my days. And so my attendants, starting with Fran, were desperate for me to recover. I appreciated their love and concern, but there was one thing I wanted to shout in their faces. Please, open your eyes and realize he just wants more time alone to do his research. They're all getting fooled. Well, I mean, so what if he does? He spent 2 years dealing with all your crap while you were asleep. And now you're finally back, able to help out more, and he wants some time to himself. Let him have that. I started exercising as per the schedule Ferdinand made for me. It started with me removing the magic tools and raising my legs while moving my arms around, but still since I wasn't at all used to moving without the magic tools, I ended with each day completely exhausted. Not to mention with Ferdinand working as my temporary Hearthspell instructor, I was being forced to practice at a much higher level than usual. I want to go back to the Royal Academy. That place was paradise. There's a library there for starters, and rather than drowning in work, I can actually relax. The more freedom you are allowed, the more those around you suffer, Ferdinand replied. You will be returned to the Royal Academy only when the Interduchy tournament demands it. It is too dangerous for you to participate in winter socializing before you have learned more about noble society. That's so mean, I wept. My library is waiting for me. You'll be fine. Ferdinand shook his head, his expression completely flat. I have a contingency plan that is marginally crueler than this, he said dryly. What the heck? That's terrifying. What the heck is that contingency plan? I want to know what it is. The morning of the dedication ritual was busy. Once my body was cleansed, I was dressed in ceremonial robes, and a flower hairpin of white and red was pushed into my braids. My magic tools had already been removed, which meant I was using enhancement magic to move. As my way of visualizing the enhancements, I called for those things professional suckless wear, bodysuits. I was in short wearing a tight bodysuit of mana. Ferdinand had said the enhancement tools were there to help me learn enhancement magic for myself, and since I had kept them on near constantly, I certainly had gotten better, albeit at the cost of my muscles and stamina. What do you actually do during the dedication ritual? Angelica asked. In response, Daniel explained that the priests will pour their mana into small chalices, which would then be distributed to the Geebs of Arenfest during spring prayer. He had gotten pretty good at coming up with simplified explanations for her, thanks to all his experience teaching her in the Raise Angelica's Grade Squadron. You sure are something else, Daniel. You're able to help Lord Ferdinand with his work, even though you're a knight. I never thought Lady Rosamund's knights would need math skills, too. Angelica said it turned out that whenever she had tried to get involved in such work in the past, the process had ended up taking twice as long to actually finish. Her parents had thereby concluded that the best way for her to help was to not help at all. I'm more impressed with how you show no hesitation at all when it comes to protecting Lady Rosamond, Daniel replied. I am grateful to have you by my side. I would never have thought to draw my sword at Lord Ferdinand. Daniel had immediately understood Ferdinand summoning his staff as one of his usual bluffs, so it was a bluff, okay. And so he hadn't moved to protect me. In a way that was unacceptable for a guard knight, it was their job to protect their lord or lady when a weapon was drawn in their presence. One might have even called you a perfect guard if you hadn't so easily been lured to the training grounds. I shall not be bewitched next time, Angelica declared. Her expression was sharp and heroic, but the glee with which she had chatted with Eckert about strength and training implied she would take the bait again faster than any fish. Great. Here's hoping she don't have to do that again. High Bishop, the High Priest is calling for you. A Grey Priest arrived to fetch me, and so I started making my way to the ritual chamber, taking extra care not to step in my own robes. As only priests could enter, my guard knights remained stationed outside the door. Eckert was also in position, so I could guess Ferdinand was already inside. The ritual chamber was filled with the aroma of the incense burning by the altar. Camphor, Freetic, and 2 other blue priests were already present, holding face stones given to them by Ferdinand. High Bishop, we are relieved to see you well again, Camphor and Freetic said together, having been entrusted with helping Ferdinand over the past couple of years. I thanked them with a smile, though I was certainly taken aback. I hadn't expected any of the blue priests to be so happy to see me awake. My attendants tell me you two have been working very hard in my absence, I said. You have my thanks. These are actually the Knights blue priests. Who would have thunk? Why couldn't she have met them? With all that, I then walked over to the altar, knelt before it, and placed both hands on the red cloth spread along the floor. I see everyone is ready. We shall now begin, Ferdinand said. Acknowledging that prompt, I sucked in air and started to recite the prayer. I am one who offers prayers and gratitude to the gods who have created the world, I intoned. The flow, 5 men behind me repeated the chant in low voices that reverberated throughout the ritual chamber. O mighty king and queen of the endless skies, O mighty eternal 5 who rule the mortal realm, O goddess of water Flutrain, O god of fire Ladenshaft, O goddess of wind Shitsaria, O goddess of earth Geduld, O god of life Avaglabe, we honor you who have blessed all beings of life, and pray that we may be blessed further with your divine might. I've actually wondered something. We've seen the names of the other gods, the main 5, but what are the names of the goddess of light and the god of darkness? That's what I wonder. As I continued the prayer, I started to feel the mana drain from my body. The red cloth sparkled as it sucked in my mana, which then turned into waves of radiant light that flowed to the altar. The feeling and the sight were both familiar to me by now. Light streamed from behind me as well, and as if caught in the momentum of their waves, more of my own mana was pulled out. Oh no, my bodysuit! It's coming away! Yep. Shouldn't have known that was going to happen. A thin layer of mana supplying my enhancements felt as though I was going to be sucked away too. My eyes shut up, and it was like my bodysuit was being torn from my body. No matter how hard I tried to resist, the waves of mana coming from behind were simply too powerful. The mana I tried to use to strengthen my enhancements was getting sucked up by the red cloth before I could do what it wanted to do. Oh no, it's gone! And you're gonna fall over. Just as I feared, the mana surrounding me was stripped away and went flowing down the cloth. It wasn't something I had anticipated at all. I'm going to need to recast the enhancements once the ritual is over. Yep. I rested my cheek against the floor, going limp as the mana continued to drain from my body. That should do, Ferdinand announced. The mana flow was quite efficient today. The other blue priest stood up, sighing with relief. I gathered up some mana in an attempt to recast my enhancement magic, but since my hands were still on the cloth, it was merely sucked right out again. The ritual is over, Ferdinand repeated. I know! At those words, I collapsed entirely. The fact that I had already been genuflecting meant I pretty much just slumped over to one side as though it didn't hurt very much, but the blue priest still started to panic. Calm yourselves, this is not a problem. I know the cause, Ferdinand said quietly but resolutely. The ritual chamber fell silent at once. Leave so that the High Bishop's attendants may enter. The blue priest left at once to summon my attendants, leaving me alone with Ferdinand. He sighed. Fool, did I not say it was still too much for you? Is now really the time to be lecturing me? Your memory is poor enough that you forget even my most important warnings in the blink of an eye. Giving a lecture at a distinctive moment like this is in fact crucial, since it's far more likely to leave an impression. You will at times be put in positions that prevent enhancement magic from functioning. At the very least, you must learn to predict such situations. I'll take my training seriously and work on my muscles just as you told me to, okay? Now please help me. Have you learned your lesson? Absolutely. So she says. Ferdinand helped me up and then handed me over to Fran, who had rushed in with a panicked look on his face. Fear not, she simply did not expect to be in a situation where she couldn't use enhanced magic, Ferdinand explained. Her health is not an issue. She'll be fine once she returns to her room and puts the magic tools back on. Understood. One can never truly trust Lady Rosamund regarding her health, Fran replied. In awe of how quickly I had ended up incapacitated, his remark made me sadly hang my head. Because I had poured so much mana into my enhancements, we were able to fill the small chalices much sooner than expected. The process took us only 3 days to complete rather than 5. And despite the drama of my collapse, it really had just resulted from me by being unable to use enhancement magic while my hands were on the dry cloth. It was different from the past when I would get sick with a fever. It was when Ferdinand gave me another checkup and said, "Good, you are toughening up a bit," then I noticed the change in my own body. What should I do next, I asked. I want to carry this momentum all the way to becoming fully healthy. Hold it. Nothing good comes from you trying so hard. I can easily envision a future in which you overdo your exercises and collapse again, Ferdinand said. He then spoke at length about how even too much of a good thing can be dangerous. I was more than a little familiar with what he was talking about, so I listened to his lecture without protest. It would be good for your health for you to continue training here, but you need to learn a bit more about socializing before you return to the Royal Academy, Ferdinand continued. Our hands are tied. You are to return to the castle. And so we began preparing to move from the temple to the castle. Ferdinand had with him boxes containing things for both his work and his research, and there was enough that I needed to make Leslie into a bigger bust than usual to accommodate it all. Over half of this is work related to your needs, Ferdinand noted, gesturing to the luggage. I expect no complaints. I personally wanted to keep Leslie as small as possible since he had gotten knocked about in the blizzards more when he was bigger, but there was no helping the situation. After all, I was the one who didn't want to leave the documents on Schwartz and Weiss as Herscher's magic tools, the sheet music, and my harpsichord at the temple. Do come see me if the blizzard forces me off course. Do come save me if the blizzard forces me off course, I said. You can handle that yourself. Simply pour more mana into your high beast. Do not bother me more than you already have. Fine. Mother, please see the truth. See that Ferdinand has neither the kindness nor the sweetness you write about in your night stories. Oh, speaking of which, you're now going to get to read those stories now, because you'll be at the castle. Oh, dear. Ferdinand's going to be there now, which means that even with the permission, you're going to have time to hide those books. We returned to the castle amid the intense blizzard. I burst through the door that Norbert was holding open, and it was shut behind me a moment later. Welcome back, Lady Rosamund, Norbert said, taking my hand and jumping me down from Leslie. He had already given out instructions. It seems the servants appeared from seemingly nowhere to start taking out the luggage from my panda bus. He wasn't the only one who came to greet me, however. Welcome back, Lady Rosamund, Elvira echoed, appearing with her retainers to welcome me back to the castle. I have been waiting for you. Shall we go elsewhere and leisurely discuss matters of printing? Oh boy, here we go. But do I want to keep going? I want to keep going, but... Okay, let's keep going. Mother and printing in Hollinsdale. Now let us hurry and get you changed, Ariarda said. Lady Elvira is waiting. She speedily started removing my warm layers of clothing the moment we returned to my room. Once we have gotten you changed, we shall go to the parlor in the main building with the box containing a gift for Lady Elvira. Everything has been prepared ahead of time. Elvira and I would be discussing books that needed to be kept private, so I was bringing only Adelie as my attendant and Angelica as my guard knight. Adelie was on good terms with Elvira. They were friends who often met in private, and it seemed Elvira had personally asked if she would become my attendee when I first came to the castle way back when. Riarda, meanwhile, had to stay behind and put away all the luggage I had brought back from the temple. Ferdinand had instructed that Herscher's things be stored in my room. Riarda, these boxes have been processed while these have not. Do not worry, milady, I can tell that from the tags on them. Thank you for having me, I said as I sat down. Adelie smiled in response. This tea party was permitted so that you might find comfort in your family, so do feel free to be more casual, she said. Once Elvira had sipped her tea and taken a bite from each type of sweet, our meeting could finally begin for real. When I met her gaze, I noticed there was a sparkle in her dark brown eyes. Rosamund, have you read my books yet, pray tell? Not entirely, I'm afraid. I've completed only one night story. I have not yet spent a full day in the castle. And there was a note saying that I needed to keep them in my room, I said, indicating that I had followed her instructions to the letter. Elvira nodded in satisfaction. Keeping them secret is what matters most. The public must not learn of them. I did thumb through them, though, and I must say, Mother, you found an excellent illustrator. The art truly took me by surprise, by which I mean Ferdinand was much too sparkly, I smiled, keeping my thoughts secret. Elvira's face positively lit up at my words. Oh, I did, didn't I? I ordered these pictures as soon as I found the illustrator. No love story is complete without illustrations of such beautiful people. It seemed that Mother had been motivated to make a collection of romance-focused night stories after seeing my own collection. In particular, the illustrations modeled after Ferdinand that Wilma had provided. But Mother, since you need to hide these books from Ferdinand, aren't you limiting who you can sell them to? Did Geeb Haldensdale give permission for these, despite knowing it would harm sales? The books I gave you were specially made for my friends. Those sold in Haldensdale contain illustrations by another artist, so there's no problem whatsoever. Wait, so they're the same book, just with different illustrations. Is it just me, or would that be a real pain in the neck for Gil and the others to work around? It would be. As far as I was aware, the Rosemine Workshop had handled the first batch of printing to accommodate Avara's needs. I had been given a report that said she had taken all the evidence for herself, leaving not even the messed up printing mistakes behind. But I hadn't heard about them struggling to deal with two separate sets of illustrations. I received no reports of there being two sets of illustrations, I noted, even when I spoke to those in the workshop directly. I made sure to emphasize to the planting company that this information was not to be leaked under any circumstances. I was curious to see how well they would protect their secrets, and I am pleased to see that the Rosemine Workshop has quite faithful workers indeed. After sipping her tea with a satisfied smile, Elvira continued. I know that the planting company took keeping their customer secrets seriously, but it was impossible to see how long that would last with those in the temple workshop not reporting matters to Lord Ferdinand. But for them to have not told you either, Rosemine, I can be sure they will take the information to their graves. That is quite the relief. Elvira went on to praise my subordinates as being quite excellent. Haldensdale's entire printing industry might collapse should Lord Ferdinand learn of these books. Goodness, my brother will never let me hear the end of it, she said. It turned out that the love stories printed in Haldensdale were selling even better than the Geeb expected, so he intended to keep pushing the printing industry further. I hope to next write a book about Lord Ferdinand's days in the Royal Academy. I fear that even deceptive illustrations will not be enough to cloak their nature, however, and so I have been too afraid to begin. I do think he will notice that. It's much too dangerous. The legends about Ferdinand's time in the Royal Academy contain so many shocking twists and turns that it were almost hard to believe. It would make an excellent book for sure, an excellent series even, but there was no way the man himself wouldn't recognize his own life story. Yeah, I have to agree. Ferdinand continues to be brought up at the Royal Academy even today. He is no doubt a frequent topic at tea parties, though, at the same time. There are some who dislike him being mentioned. I gathered information on it, Mother. If you would care to look, I said, having Audley bring out the box that would serve as my gift. Inside were the collected tales about Ferdinand, which Roderick had desperately organized together after everyone worked so hard to gather them. Oh my, Elvira explained. What a splendid gift. She opened the box at once, wasting no time in looking over its contents. You know, I want to read Mother's books too, though preferably without the Ferdinand illustrations. Elvira truly did love to learn about Ferdinand. As she read through the data, she made comments like, oh, so this is how that event is spoken of in the records. And the romance is the most important part, yet there is no mention of it here. I mean, as far as I know, he hasn't had any kind of romantic involvement with anybody. She speedily organized it all into information she did and didn't already know. Most of what I know about Lord Ferdinand comes from Eckert, so I do enjoy seeing how other duchies speak about him, Elvira said after finishing her initial glimpse over the papers. As more and more time passed since Ferdinand's graduation from the Royal Academy, the tales about him grew more and more exaggerated, which made for some especially interesting stories. This information was put together by our first year named Roderick, I said. Would that perhaps be the men noble from the former Veronica faction who tricked Lord Wilfrid at the hunting tournament? I'm impressed you remember her, Mother. I really hadn't expected her to remember Roderick. I blinked in surprise, which gave Elvira an opportunity to set down her cup and look at me with concern. Rosemine, you must not forget your enemies. They are dangerous. I knew that Roderick himself wasn't dangerous, and this seemed like my best opportunity to convince Elvira to change her mind. Roderick is not malicious. He was simply misled by his parents. Oh yes, certainly. But the most dangerous people of all are those who bring you misinformation with no malice, or misfortune with no malice. It is much easier to defend against clear enemies with blatant malevolence, but the world is rarely so simple, Elvira said, her tone like that of a parent lecturing a stubborn child. Men nobles and lay nobles will come flocking our way for their own benefit once they confirm we have grown in size. Protecting themselves by clinging to more powerful forces is their way of surviving. I have no intention of criticizing this behavior, but it is the reason they cannot be trusted. Considering how dramatically status changed the way one was treated in the world, it only made sense to look for safety by clinging to the more powerful factions possible. Or most powerful faction possible. Men nobles and lay nobles simply thought differently than the archducal family and the archnobles, who instead had to strive to be leaders and trailblazers. Rosamund, you often base your decisions not on what is best for you, but on your feelings. You have taken your favored lay nobles as retainers, but I am deathly afraid they will betray you if the balance of power were to ever shift again. They would never. Daniel and Feline both served me well, I said. Neither of them was the type to betray the one they served. Daniel especially had risked his life on multiple occasions to protect me. Were he the sort of person to even consider betrayal, I would already be dead. As I shook my head in their defense, Elvira nodded. I know. Daniel and Feline are truly loyal to you. I gathered enough evidence to leave no room for doubt there, she said. I widened my eyes. She had somehow gathered enough intelligence to prove Feline's loyalty despite me having only taken her as an attendant after leaving for the Royal Academy. Elvira gave me a very noblewoman-like smile. You mustn't underestimate my information network, dear. Alida Elvira was quite a skilled scholar in the past, Audley explained, after also smiling as she exchanged a glance with her friend. I thought back to how the apprentice scholars in the Royal Academy were pulling out all the stops to gather and organize information. It was a bit late for me to be realizing this, but not only now did it strike me just how skilled Elvira was at gathering intelligence from tea parties and all sorts of other places. I imagine that unless you commit some terribly offensive blunder, Daniel and Feline's loyalties will never waver. However, you must not think that mindset can be applied to other men nobles and lay nobles. If you insist. I had wanted to justify taking Roderick as a retainer by striking Elvira at her weakest point, her love for the legends of Ferdinand, but that had evidently backfired. She had instead warned me not to trust others so easily, reinforcing that I was not to take him as a retainer. Furthermore, it is tradition to pay those of an opposing faction about 60% of what you would pay someone of the same faction, Elvira said. This amount is then slowly raised in accordance with their efforts. Wait, what? That's the first I'm hearing of this. You symbolically demonstrate fairness by paying those of opposing factions while nonetheless showing favoritism to your own. Putting people in a position where they feel changing to your faction is the best interest. There's no point to professing membership to a faction if everyone is treated the same. Not to mention none of your allies will delight in being treated the same as your enemies. You have little appreciation for your faction, but if you do not learn the ways of politics, you will make your existing allies very displeased. Just how much of my Royal Academy antics were leaking out? Neither Sylvester nor Ferdinand had lectured me about this. Are you thinking it is strange that I know about your time in the Royal Academy? Riarda gave her reports after you left for the temple. Given Hersher's constant absences and unreliability, we are discussing whether we should send someone else to help manage the dormitory. A manager, I asked. Ehrenfest had garnered very little interest from other duchies in the past, so its leaders had predicted my products would hardly spread at all during my first year, no matter how hard we pushed them. And yet my blunders have resulted in me forming surprise relationships with all the most powerful and influential people in the Royal Academy, professors, archduke candidates from greater duchies, and even royalty. Ehrenfest needed as much information as it could get on higher-ranking duchies before the Archduke Conference, but with Hersher so fervently researching Schwartz and Weiss, she was completely useless. Someone eventually suggested that we might need a person in the Royal Academy to report on your every action, Elvira noted. That someone being Lord Ferdinand, of course. Uh-oh, Spadudios, we are in trouble. If that's the case, we're going to definitely be in trouble. But is he actually going to do it? Because he has to be at the temple. He's the high priest. Or can he now delegate all that to the blue priests? Is that the marginally crueler contingency plan he was talking about? Assigning someone to the Royal Academy specifically to control me? That's not marginally crueler. That's way crueler. As I cradled my head with despair, Elvira dropped her eyes back to the papers detailing the legends about Ferdinand and let out a dreamy sigh. Still, to think this much information about Lord Ferdinand still lingered in the Royal Academy. Indeed, I was as surprised as you are, I said. According to those who gathered the intelligence, the current situation is that people from other duchies know more about Ferdinand than those from Ehrenfest. As it turned out, not many people in Ehrenfest had openly discussed Ferdinand since he went to the temple. Daniel respected him, but most students nowadays didn't even know he existed. Most students in the Ehrenfest dormitory viewed the legends about Ferdinand with skepticism, asserting that they were exaggerated or even misattributed. I had to admit not even I could tell whether the stories were true. Why do they know so much more than we do, I asked. Oh, I know what would be a good idea if Lord Ferdinand was to come to the academy. He could help with training the knights. He could help train the apprentice knights and get them back up to speed on coordination and such. Who could go against him? Well, in Ehrenfest, I mean. Lord Ferdinand's grades were so high that he earned Lady Veronica's wrath. All those in Ehrenfest feared to speak about him, Elvira said, looking down joylessly. Ferdinand wasn't Veronica's son by blood, but he had been baptized as the Archduke's son and made an Archduke candidate. Veronica's 2 daughters had already been wed to other duchies by the time he was baptized, leaving only 2 candidates in Ehrenfest. Ferdinand would be the next Archduke by default if something happened to Sylvester, and even if something didn't, his grades were impressive enough that his name was known across all the other duchies. Sylvester, meanwhile, had zero motivation and generally left his work to Ferdinand. In other words, there was more than enough reason for Veronica to fear Ferdinand rising to power. She treated Lord Ferdinand viciously ever since his baptism, but her cruelty only ever grew worse when the previous Archduke fell ill. The more excellence Lord Ferdinand showed, the harsher she treated him. Nobody could interfere to help him either. Eventually, Lord Sylvester recommended that he flee to the temple. That reminded me, I had heard that since Ferdinand had entered the temple a short while before his father passed, he hadn't been able to attend the funeral as his son. The thought he hadn't been even gotten to see him one last time really made Veronica seem unreasonably callous. If only he had stayed in the castle for a bit longer, he could have been there when his father died, I sighed. I feel so bad for Ferdinand. Elvira paused for a brief moment before responding. He likely did see him. The official announcement was not long after Lord Ferdinand entered the temple, so we can conclude that he actually climbed the towering stairways sometime before that. It turned out the funerals for archdukes were carried out after the Archduke Conference. Their deaths were reported at the conference, and their funerals were held after the next Archduke had been selected and returned to their duchy. Neighboring archdukes and nobles would come to attend the funeral, so time-stopping magic was used to preserve the corpse. This resulted in there sometimes being a sizable gap between the death itself and the date of its public announcement, which was why Elvira presumed Ferdinand had been able to see the body. I sure hope so, at least. And now Lord Ferdinand can live to his fullest without hesitating in the public eye, for Elvira said. That's all I could ever ask for. Why are you so invested in Ferdinand, Mother? Things may be different now, but was it not dangerous to publicly support him in the past? Assuming that Veronica had indeed ostracized Ferdinand as harshly as everyone said, showing him any support at all was surely enough to earn her displeasure. Perhaps I should explain. It is not particularly a secret, but considering that Lord Sylvester and Lord Wilfrid are involved, I do not know whether I should speak so freely. Oh dear, Elvira said, placing a hand on her cheek and tilting her head. Adelaide took this opportunity to say her piece, sadly lowering her eyes while refreshing our tea. Lady Elvira was likewise ostracized by Lady Veronica. You were? I asked. My mother was Lady Veronica's older sister, you see, though they did not share mothers. So the same father. You mean my grandmother on your side? I had been given a list of noble names to memorize before my baptism, but it hadn't specified how they were all related. Plus, the only family tree I had seen was centered around Karlstadt's side of the family. My knowledge about Elvira's side was painfully scarce as a result. At most, I was aware that Veronica had been on very bad terms with her half-brothers and sisters, to the point that they had refused to take her younger brother Besenwat's possessions following his death. It had never even crossed my mind that Elvira might be on that side of the family. The fourth Archduke's son was my grandfather. His marrying Gabrielle, the Arenbach Archduke candidate, was widely considered to be the root cause of this current dispute. Gabrielle had fallen in love with Elvira's grandfather after he had treated her kindly at the Introduccy tournament. She had an unfortunately small mana capacity for an Archduke candidate of a greater duchy, but since Ehrenfest had even less influence than it does now, that didn't matter. She had used her father's authority as the Archduke of a greater duchy to force the marriage to happen, whether Elvira's grandfather wanted it or not, which ultimately resulted in his first wife, Elvira's grandmother, and the daughter of Count Leisgang, being demoted to his second wife, despite the fact they already had 2 children together. The fourth Archduke feared the consequence of such an insult, particularly with Count Leisgang having been the leader of the most powerful faction in the duchy during the rule of the fourth Archduke. He was likewise concerned that Ehrenbach's influence within the duchy would grow large enough to cause problems. It was for those reasons that he removed Elvira's grandfather from the Archduke candidacy and awarded him the title of Count Groschel. Oh, so this is, Brunhilde's family. Okay. While choosing Bonifatius' father as the next Archduke. Count Leisgang's fury was subsequently contained when Bonifatius wedded another of his daughters. I'm literally drawing at the family trees here, but they're just too complicated. My head's starting to hurt. The bloodlines are getting all mixed up. Ironically, it seems that Gabrielle found living in such a backwater countryside duchy unbearable, and she constantly yearned to go back to Ehrenbach. Gabrielle bore 3 children in her lifetime. Her first was a boy who ended up having the most mana of all his siblings, and due in part to support from Ehrenbach, he was praised as a potential candidate to succeed Count Groschel. Her second child was Veronica, whose mana capacity was extraordinarily greater than the low average in Ehrenfest. It was only natural that she would be raised to serve as the first wife of the next Archduke. The third child, whom Gabrielle birthed while ill, had much low mana than one would expect of an archnoble. He was unable to rely on Ehrenbach's support, and so he ended up being sent to the temple. It was during this grueling third birth that Gabrielle ultimately passed away. Years went by, and the first son passed away also. Veronica began keeping in close contact with her fully blood-related younger brother in the temple, doting on him and developing a relationship in which they both completely relied on one another. Lady Veronica became the first wife of the 6th Archduke, and it was then that she truly began abusing her half-siblings. Though it was certainly easier for her to target her younger nieces and nephews than her older brothers and sisters. My brother and I suffered greatly through a variety of creative means. For the most part, Veronica couldn't be too blatant in her abuse. After all, they were still children of Geeb Haldensale. But she would invite Elvira to girls-only tea parties and harass her in a variety of awful ways. My grandfather regretted this state of affairs, so he tried to protect me by wedding me to Lord Karlstadt. This in turn granted me independence from Veronica. It was thanks to the marriage that Elvira had been able to make a faction composed of those ostracized by Veronica, protect Valencia when she was wedded from Frembeltag into the family, and support Ferdinand when he was abused for being the son of a mistress. When the previous Archduke climbed the towering stairway, Lady Veronica's treatment of Haldensale grew even harsher, since it is ruled by my older brother. Do you recall that Haldensale is the northernmost province in the duchy? The winters there are much harsher than the ones we experience here. Raised taxes are a matter of life and death for its people. Despite the entire duchy having been drained, Haldensale alone received no exception whatsoever. It suffered far more than any other province in the duchy, even when taxes were raised for everyone. My brother says you have saved him and his people, Rosemine. It was only after I joined the temple as an apprentice Blue Shrine Maiden that Haldensale started receiving chalices filled with mana, which increased crop production throughout the province. Veronica and Besenwatch were then punished for their crimes, and the Florencia faction, led by the Geeb's younger sister Elvira, became the most powerful faction in the duchy. Now life had truly been braved into Haldensale. On top of all that, the books my brother helped to make, in part out of gratitude alone, have sold much better than expected, Elvira explained. He now wishes to spread printing all throughout Haldensale. That's quite exciting to hear, I replied. However, as obvious as it was, one needed paper to print things. They had planned to make plant paper workshops along with the printing workshops, but my falling into a coma had prevented them from doing so. The same went for other Geebs who had heard of the success in Ilvner and wanted to try paper making themselves. Not to mention the magic contracts bind even the sale of paper, no? The magic contracts for merchants I had signed worked only within Ehrenfest, but with the exact limits of the magic being fuzzy at best, people had no choice but to sell through the planting company. That worked decently enough at the moment, given that there weren't all that many books, but it couldn't last forever. Elvira also wanted the magic contracts nullified, and when I realized that, I unconsciously clenched my fist resting atop my lap. I don't want to nullify the contracts I made with Lutz and Benno. Benno had put his all into thinking of a way to ensure I could meet with them and maintain relationships with the lower city ever since I was taken to the nobles, even once I was taken to the nobles' quarter. Lutz had likewise steeled his resolve and signed the contracts, even though doing so put him in danger. I was really against the nullification, and that must have shown on my face as Elvira gave me a consoling smile. Rosemine, you have surrounded yourself with people of the highest moral caliber. Huh? No matter how much my brother interrogated the planting company about the magic contracts, they obstinately repeated that they would need to ask Ob Ehrenfest for details. It seemed doing so was necessary to protect her past, as you signed it while living in the temple as a shrine maiden. Benno had refused to speak of the contract, even when surrounded by archnobles. Knowing that made me so happy and proud of him and Lutz that I couldn't help but nod a little. However, the contracts are far too small to protect you now. Do you not need new ones to suit your current status, as books and printing spread throughout the country? A new contract? Indeed, your relationship with the planting company will not change. Even if the former contracts are nullified, am I not right in saying that you need only sign new ones? My relationship with the planting company wouldn't change just because the contracts did. I simply needed to sign new ones. Elvira was right about that. But there won't be contracts between mine and Lutz. Well, technically, that changed, I think, when You became Rosemine. Didn't they magically change to reflect your new name? I kept those words to myself and merely sighed instead. Okay, I'm going to end this off here, and I'll see you guys next time.